His name is Moshe Winter. The book is Winds of War. If I get those confused, I am sorry. Hey, you geeks. And now for something completely different. Seriously, if you like charted on the map of fantasy genre where Onyx Storm in the Imperium series is, today's topic, Winds of War by Moshe Winter, would be as far away from that point as physically possible. So how did I come to be reviewing this book? Well, I've seen Moshe Winter over on the Instagram. I am on Instagram. You can follow me, my skirt and I, over there for more short-related content. So over on the Instagram, Moshe reached out to me to ask if I would like an advanced reader copy of his upcoming book, releasing ebook edition tomorrow as of this video's release. His book, The Winds of War, sounded interesting enough, and I'd seen him around in the Stormlight fandom space, so I figured I would like this book too. Taking advanced reader copy meant that I was obliged to provide a review, so here it is, with all of my thoughts on the good, the bad, and the interesting, which is not unforgivable, but it is interesting, and it includes spice. This book has spice in it, which we'll get to that later. So here are my non-spoiler thoughts of The Winds of War, Book 1 of The Tapestry of the Tarnished by Moshe Winter. The good. In the foreword, Moshe explains that this is his first novel, and it's self-published, which means that this man has undertaken a huge effort to get this piece together, and that in and of itself is worth commending. Like, I'm trying to do my own thing with my writing, and I'm just not there yet, so I'm impressed at all that he got this massive work together with his community support and everything all around that. So no matter what critiques I lay later, I'm fundamentally impressed with the man and hope that these thoughts will help him to create better works in the future. This is good, but it could be better. Once the plot was underway, I was hooked. I was even getting irritated in daily life that I couldn't be reading the book because I wanted to know how it ended, even if it was just to see if my own theories were correct. I got hooked eventually, and it was totally worth it. A lesser perk for me is that this book confirms my theory that we can divide fantasy genre into the manly male serious books and the light frilly feminine ones based on their use of the words obsidian or onyx. Winds of War uses obsidian, so it's a macho book. On a more serious positive note, this book always felt like it was an epic story, and this book is supposed to be an epic. Books that sell themselves as epics but sometimes feel rather D&D-ish tend to annoy me. This book did not have that problem. I can't explain where the line is, but The Winds of War is safely in the epic category. I think part of the reason why it always felt epic is because Moshe really just wove in the deep epic world building at every stage of this book. This is a post-cataclysmic world that's not a spoiler, and you feel it in every chapter that what happened long, long ago is impacting the events of today. And I really appreciate his storytelling for that. Now, because this world building is combined in at every chapter along the way, it helps build up the twists that happen in this book's climax. It's not a spoiler to say there will be twists. You know that, and I want to let you know I think they paid off pretty well. And the world building contributed to it. I think a lot of would-be authors get lost in the world building weeds and forget to tie it into the plot. Moshe does not have that problem. This book does have a pretty epic climax. I'm not going to call it a full-on plot avalanche, but we're almost to Shadow Rising level, but not exactly the Way of Kings level as far as conclusions go. As for the characters, I did grow to care for some of them. I mean, for crying out loud, there's a wolf boy, and I do love those. And Maxon got there eventually. Moshe also successfully got me to completely loathe a character. And I was kind of worried about it for a while because I'm like, I loathe this character, but I don't know if I'm supposed to. But by the end, I was like, oh, good. Everyone's going to loathe this character. Good job. You've made him despicable. I like it. An author's job is, of course, to create feelings in the reader. And Moshe does that with some of these characters, and when it lands so well. Another great thing about this book is the plot mechanics and Moshe's use of tropes. Some he plays straight, and it's surprising when he plays them straight because he also inverts or re-examines others in a very deft manner. One non-spoiler one is that one of the POV characters is in fact a shadow mommy type character, not a daddy, which my dabble in romantasy has taught me that I really like shadow daddies, and I appreciate the trope inversion, even if shadow mommies just aren't my cup of tea. Speaking of tea, oh my gosh, there is so much drama and tea spilt in this book. Like, it's not just armies and magic systems and dragons. Like, the character interplay and personal drama takes a very large portion of this story, and it's great to see. In fact, I'd hazard to say that there is more tea spilled in the final arc of The Winds of War than in the entirety of A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. That is the book, not the series. So overall, on the macro level, The Winds of War is a great read and a great time with a fulfilling payoff. That's the destination. I'm going to get a little bit nitpicky now about the journey. The bad. Before I dig in with my critiques on the writing and structure of this book, I do want to kind of disclaim that some of this is going to be colored by the fact that I was given an advanced reader copy to physically read, and although I have an impressive display of shelf trophies, I think, I'm an audiobook reader fundamentally because when I read things in print like I do for my work, I read to tear the arguments apart. Knowing that was fundamentally unfair to Moshe, I did eventually get this on my phone to have Siri just read the page to me, which turned off the really cynical part of my brain, although audiobook narrators are worth every cent when they are real people, let me tell you. Another thing about this book that is just not my taste is that it's grimdark, and that's pretty evident from the first sentence. However, unfortunately for Moshe, I've seen a goat get gelded, so, that's where my brain went, and not to, wherever he wanted us to go. I think with grimdark, it's supposed to be shocking and revolting, the blood, the guts, and the gore that help suspend your disbelief. Like in romantasy, the fact that the male has an 8-pack helps the other parts go down easier. But for me, as I said before on this channel, I've worked with law enforcement, I've done work with child protection, and so yeah, I'm above and beyond desensitized to violence, and the mere fact that something is gory,
That's ancient history, been there, done that.
Now, even though grimdark ain't my favorite thing, and starting it in print just gave me a chip on my shoulder while reading the beginning, I think that Moshe makes a commendable contribution to the subgenre, as I went back a few weeks ago for another project to watch Attack on Titan, The Struggle for Trust, because I wanted to see some Titans get decapitated. Yet I realized that 9-episode arc 6 of those episodes are just characters screaming at each other and being angry. And then only 3 of them actually involve battling titans and that showing off that really cool animation style they have. The Winds of War does not have that problem. Characters actually talk to each other, connections are made, families are forged, and the plot moves forward. It doesn't just stall. However, I think that Moshe sometimes, at the beginning at least, pushes that plot forward so quickly, I had a hard time keeping up. Which brings us to the first real critique I have of this book. Above and beyond the cynicism I had opening it, there's still the issue of how many named characters Moshe drops in, like, the first 3 chapters. And there's, like, 12 POV characters in those 3 chapters. They switch in mid-chapter, and each POV character has their own squad of, like, 4 to 5 people. So there's a lot going on. And as he just drives that plot forward, I feel like some of the emotional ties as to why characters think what they're doing is a good idea is kind of lost, as he's just trying to take you on this sweeping adventure and be overawed by everything that's happening. And at a certain point, I just could not grasp it until the plot finally slowed down, and I was like, oh, these are those people. But still, even, like, at the end, like, instead of just having a red shirt, he'll just drop a random name of a guard. It's like, we don't need that. We really don't need that. Also, another struggle I had at the beginning is that the exposition dumps were a lot of one character telling the other something they already know. But without that emotional tie-in, it sounded more like Zhao's speech in that movie that doesn't exist.
As you know, the Fire Lord has banished his son, the Prince.
Once I got into the story, this flaw, of course, solves itself, but then opens the way for another problem I had, which is the intermediate world building needs a little work. I think he was trying to keep it vague for twist-related reasons, but I'm still not exactly clear on what happened like 15 years before the book began, or what was thought to have happened and then what actually happened. It also doesn't help that the Empress says that she was 15 years old 15 years ago, which means that she's currently 30, and she has a 15-year-old younger sister. And she has older brothers, which means that, like, her mother must have been married off at, like, 14, which is fine. Like, this is a generic European-style fantasy, but to have the Empress be unmarried at 30 and not doing the Virgin Queen lifestyle seemed a bit weird. Maybe some of that was covered in the epigraphs, which the epigraphs as a whole are epic and poetic and beautiful, but again, it's all about that deep world building stuff and not so much about, like, the character's personal history before the story started. So I would have liked more of that. Maybe they'll unpack it in future books, because this is a series. And I think one of my biggest fears going into this book is that a lot of the character arcs would be unfinished in the name of keeping the series going, but this book did not have that problem. Yay! But we lack some personal history of these characters that would have made me care for them more than just sad wolf boy, sad dragon boy, shadow mommy, and chieftainess. Let's get about the chieftainess. I absolutely do not like that title. Like, it's just so hard to say. And chief in English is a gender-neutral word. If you were, like, feminizing it in French, it would be like chef or chieftain, which would sound the same for English. So, like, the S, I had a lisp growing up, and I'm like, this word feels like it's attacking me. Also, all authors have their own favorite go-to word. Sanderson had maladroit and pressed lips into a thin line. Moshe Winter has grimaced, which, since my audiobook said it like that every time, just stuck out like a sore thumb. In fact, I kind of concocted a whole drinking game around his overuse of the word grimaced. Expert level is take a shot every time the word grimaced comes on page. To temper that down a bit, you should take a drink of water or juice every time a Stormlight Archive-ish word comes on page. And you should take a sip of beer every time a Game of Thrones homage comes on page. Yeah, I'd kind of written off that the blurb does compare it to George R.R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire, because everything gets compared to George R.R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire these days, but that's not ad hyperbole. Like, really, the influence is evident, but it's even better, I think, because we actually get magic system and dragon fire in the book, unlike A Song of Ice and Fire. And Moshe says that our hope in him will not be displaced, so maybe he'll finish this, which is a great thing. So even with those very specific and detailed critiques, I did overall enjoy this book and would read the sequel when Moshe finishes it. However, there are still a few things I found neither great nor terrible, just, interesting. Even though I really do like this book, I also feel like it could have benefited from a final revision for keeping things tonally consistent and picking up little details that may have gotten missed the first few times around. For example, there's an early conversation with the chieftainess character who felt like she had gotten gender swapped maybe halfway through the writing and then went back to go just switch the gender going into the midpoint. The conversation was a joke about the maternity of other people's children. Like, she is a good guy friend, and the joke was questioning if she was actually the mother of his children. Again, this is like a European style clan environment. There's not a harem situation. DNA testing isn't a thing, not even magically. So, this is a society where maternity is fact and paternity is what is a matter of opinion. So that joke kind of really fell flat for me. I'm sorry. Child protection worker. I'm like, this isn't funny. That was one thing. Another thing, again, how long these sibling ranges are and how sparse they are interplayed just felt weird. And then it gets to the spice, which there are several spice scenes in the book, which I mean between 5 and 7. And it gets progressively more detailed and emotion-driven as we go along. The first one was Smash to Black, followed by On Scene, which was begun with the line that made my toes curl, but afterward, I read the whole scene because it was so bland and kind of I've heard men wax more poetic about taking a dump than that particular scene, and the female's enjoyment of the action, if she did, was the subclause of a sentence that was mostly about what the people in the street were doing, which grammatically just kind of sends weird vibes to me. By the end, we got scenes that was oh, they're having fun or having a moment here. That's good. I don't need to read this, and bounce. I would rather bounce on a well-written spice scene than just read it straight through because it's not doing anything for anyone, I don't think. Now, as I got an advanced reader copy, I do know that there are typos and a final edit is going to be happening, but it sounded more for the grammatical line edit work and not so much characterization throughout. which I think that kind of edit should have happened before it got released, which would have taken this book from like good to great territory for a grimdark novel. I think at this point in the publication process, Moshe could fix some of this for audiobook readers like myself, like by hiring really good narrators. Like if he hasn't already hired Michael and Kate because they are the top, he could hire their son and another qualified female reader to do the narration, because it really needs that work to kind of polish the very good fundamentals he's laid down for them. And they would also bring in some of the characterization that's established later into those earlier scenes that I don't think the writing itself carries. Then again, it took me a while to ditch my this is a police report skepticism level of reading and get into this is a fantasy book, I'm having fun mindset. So that's my main suggestion for moving forward. I hope he continues the series. I now am invested. I would like to finish it, even accepting the quirks and that this isn't exactly my favorite thing. I'm still intrigued. So take that for what you will. I'd say I'd read it again with a decent narrator, so 3 stars from me. And I hope to see you guys next week when I will return to the Cosmere. Please like, share, and subscribe if you want to see more. Thanks for watching. Bye!